What would you do if you came home early and found your 8-year-old daughter crying alone on the floor, scrubbing muddy footprints with her bare hands while your in-laws took their real grandchild to the zoo? This is the story of how one family photo revealed the ugly truth about conditional love and why sometimes protecting your child means burning bridges you thought would last forever. I never thought I'd become a mother at 24. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. My sister Sarah and her husband Tom died in a flash flood 3 years ago. One minute, they were driving home from date night. The next minute, their car was swept away by a wall of water that came out of nowhere. They left behind Chloe, who was 5 at the time, a tiny girl with Sarah's green eyes and Tom's stubborn chin. I didn't hesitate. While other family members debated who should take her, I was already packing her Disney suitcase. Chloe needed stability, not a committee meeting about her future. The adoption paperwork took 8 months. 8 months of lawyers, social workers, and psychological evaluations. But the day that Judge signed those papers, Chloe officially became my daughter. Not my niece. My daughter. 2 years later, I met Mark at a coffee shop downtown. He was debugging code on his laptop, cursing under his breath at a stubborn algorithm. I offered him my phone charger, and somehow we ended up talking for 3 hours. When I mentioned Chloe, most guys would have found an excuse to leave. Mark asked to see pictures. Their first meeting was magical. Mark brought a robotics kit and spent the entire afternoon teaching Chloe how to build a walking dinosaur. She was 7, brilliant, and completely enchanted by this man who treated her like she was the most important person in the room. When Mark proposed 6 months later, he got down on one knee twice. Once for me, and once for Chloe. He asked her permission to be her dad, not just my husband. She said yes so fast she nearly knocked him over. We thought we'd found our happily ever after. A complete family built on love, not just biology. Then we met Mark's parents. Harold and Margaret Fletcher seemed lovely at first glance. Harold was a retired bank manager with silver hair and expensive suits. Margaret taught piano lessons and made elaborate Sunday dinners. They welcomed me with warm hugs and genuine smiles. But with Chloe, something was different. Subtle. The kind of thing you question yourself about because it's never quite obvious enough to call out. They'd ask about her grades, her friends, her interests. But there was always this undertone, like they were studying a science experiment rather than getting to know their granddaughter. The real test came when Mark's sister Jessica visited with her daughter Emma. Emma was Chloe's age, blonde and bubbly, with Harold's eyes and Margaret's musical talent. The biological granddaughter. I watched Margaret's face light up when Emma walked in. The same woman who gave Chloe polite attention suddenly became animated, dropping to her knees to envelope Emma in the kind of hug she'd never given Chloe. That first dinner was telling. Emma got asked about her piano recital, her soccer team, her favorite subjects. Chloe got asked if she was being good in school. Not how school was going, just if she was being good. When Emma showed off her latest artwork, Margaret gushed about her natural talent and immediately hung it on the refrigerator. When Chloe shyly showed her a story she'd written, Margaret smiled politely and set it aside. It was death by 1,000 tiny cuts, each interaction seemingly innocent, but collectively devastating. Mark noticed too, but we both hoped we were reading too much into it. They were adjusting, we told ourselves. Building relationships takes time. We were wrong. And Chloe was paying the price for our optimism. The differences started small. So small that calling them out would have made me look petty. Christmas morning was the first real wake-up call. I'll never forget walking into the Fletchers' living room and seeing the stockings hanging above their fireplace. 7 stockings in a perfect row. Emma's stocking was gorgeous. Hand-embroidered with her full name in gold thread, complete with little musical notes and soccer balls representing her interests. It probably cost more than my car payment. Next to it hung Chloe's stocking, a plain red one with her name written in black Sharpie. Not even good handwriting. Margaret caught me staring and quickly explained, "Oh, we ran out of time to get Chloe's personalized. You know how busy the holidays are." Except Emma's stocking looked professionally done, the kind of thing you order months in advance. Then came the presents. Emma unwrapped gift after gift, the latest iPad, AirPods, a professional art set, dance lessons for the next 6 months. Her pile grew so tall it threatened to topple over. Chloe opened her gifts quietly. A generic puzzle from the dollar store, a coloring book, some crayons that looked like they'd been regifted from a restaurant kids' meal. I watched my daughter's face as she forced a smile and said thank you. 8 years old, and already learning to hide her disappointment. That broke something inside me. Mark was furious when we got home. He'd been helping Harold with the turkey and missed the present exchange. When I told him what happened, he immediately called his mother. I could hear Margaret's voice through the phone, defensive and shrill. Well, we don't know Chloe's interests as well. Emma's been in our lives since birth. These things take time. Time. Always time. As if love had an expiration date for when it was supposed to kick in. The pattern continued through spring. Emma got enrolled in piano lessons with Margaret's former colleague, a woman who'd taught concert pianists. Chloe asked if she could learn too. Margaret said piano wasn't for everyone. Maybe Chloe should try something more suited to her personality. What did that even mean, more suited to her personality? When Emma scored her first goal in soccer, Harold filmed the entire game and posted it on Facebook with a lengthy caption about his brilliant granddaughter. When Chloe won the school science fair with a volcano that actually worked, I didn't see a single social media post. But the worst part wasn't what they did. It was what they didn't do. They never asked Chloe about her dreams, never remembered her favorite color, never learned that she was scared of thunderstorms, but loved the sound of rain on windows, never discovered that she made up songs while she brushed her teeth, or that she named all her stuffed animals after constellations. Emma got asked about her day, her friends, her feelings. Chloe got asked if she'd finished her homework. I started watching Chloe more carefully after family visits. She'd become quiet for days afterward. Withdrawn, she'd sit in her room arranging and rearranging her bookshelf like she was trying to create order in a world that suddenly felt chaotic. One evening in May, I found her in the bathroom staring at herself in the mirror. She was touching her dark hair, pulling it up to see how she'd look blonde like Emma. "Baby, what are you doing?" She looked at me with those serious green eyes. "Do you think I'd be prettier if I looked more like Emma?" My heart shattered. Right there in our bathroom with the Disney shower curtain and the step stool shaped like a frog. "Chloe, you are beautiful exactly as you are. You're perfect." She nodded, but I could see she didn't believe me. 8 years old and already wondering if she needed to change herself to be worthy of love. That night, I made a decision. I was going to limit our visits with the Fletchers. Mark could see his parents whenever he wanted, but I wasn't going to keep serving up my daughter's self-esteem as a sacrifice to keep the peace. I should have stuck to that decision. Should have trusted my instincts. But life had other plans. The call came on a Tuesday morning in July. I was editing photos from a maternity shoot when my phone buzzed with the kind of opportunity that could change everything. Nordstrom wanted me for their fall campaign. 3 days in Los Angeles, shooting with A-list models, working with the creative director I'd been following on Instagram for years. The kind of gig that could launch my photography career into the stratosphere. There was just one problem. The shoot was in 4 days and Mark was already scheduled to fly to Seattle for an emergency client situation. Some critical code had crashed their entire payment system and Mark was the only one who knew how to fix it. I stared at the email cursor hovering over the reply button. This was my dream job, but I couldn't leave Chloe alone, and our usual babysitter was visiting her grandmother in Florida. That's when my phone rang. Jessica. "Hey Olivia, I heard through Mark about your Nordstrom opportunity. Congratulations." I was surprised she knew. Mark and Jessica weren't particularly close, but news traveled fast in their family. "Thanks, but I'm not sure I can make it work. Childcare issues." "Oh, that's terrible. You can't miss an opportunity like that." Her voice was warm, sympathetic. What if mom and dad watch the girls Emma's been asking for a sleepover with Chloe anyway? My stomach immediately twisted. Everything in me screamed no, but Jessica kept talking. They'd love the chance to spend quality time with Chloe. I know things have been a little awkward, but this could be perfect for bonding. 3 whole days with just the girls. The reasonable part of my brain kicked in. Maybe this was exactly what Chloe and the Fletchers needed. Time without Mark and me there to act as buffers. A chance for them to connect without any distractions. I don't know, Jessica. They've never watched Chloe overnight before. Mom raised 4 kids, Olivia. She's practically a professional grandmother. And Emma will be there to keep Chloe company. It'll be like camp. I found myself wavering. This job could pay for Chloe's college fund. Could establish me as a serious photographer instead of someone who just did family portraits and baby pictures. Plus, Jessica continued, it might be good for Chloe to spend time with them without you hovering. Sometimes kids act differently when parents aren't around to rescue them. Hovering. The word stung because part of me wondered if it was true. Had I been so protective that I'd prevented natural relationships from forming, let me talk to Mark. Mark was conflicted too when I called him. I don't love it, Liv, but you're right, this could be huge for your career. And maybe mom and dad just need more one-on-one time with Chloe. What if something happens? Jessica will be there the whole time, and it's only 3 days. 3 days felt like 3 years when it came to leaving Chloe with people who treated her like an afterthought for the past year. But then I thought about the other photographers who'd kill for this opportunity. About the college applications Chloe would fill out in 10 years and the tuition bills we'd need to pay. About setting an example for my daughter that women can chase their dreams. I called Jessica back that evening. Okay, but I want to go over everything with your parents first. Chloe's routine, her dietary restrictions, her bedtime. She's not used to sleeping away from home. Of course. Mom's already planning activities. She found this amazing zoo exhibit that just opened. Emma's been begging to go. The zoo? Chloe loved animals. Maybe this would be the thing that finally broke through with Harold and Margaret. I spent the next 2 days preparing obsessively. I wrote detailed instructions about Chloe's bedtime routine, her favorite foods, what to do if she had nightmares. I packed her comfort items, extra clothes, enough books to last a month. The morning I was supposed to leave, Chloe clung to me at the Fletchers' front door. I want to come with you, Mama. Margaret appeared behind us, all smiles and reassurance. Oh, sweetie, you're going to have so much fun with Grandma and Grandpa. We have so many special things planned. I knelt down to Chloe's level. It's only 3 days, baby, and you'll get to hang out with Emma. Think of all the cousin bonding you can do. Chloe nodded, but her eyes were worried. She whispered in my ear, what if they forget I'm here? The question hit me like a physical blow, but Margaret was already ushering us inside, and Jessica was loading Chloe's suitcase, and Emma was bouncing around excited about their sleepover adventure. I kissed Chloe goodbye and promised to call every night. As I drove away, I caught sight of her in the rearview mirror, standing at the window watching my car disappear. I should have turned around right then, should have listened to that voice in my head screaming that this was a mistake. Instead, I caught my flight to Los Angeles, convinced I was doing the right thing for our family's future. I had no idea I was about to destroy my daughter's present. The shoot wrapped 6 hours early. The creative director loved my work so much that we finished everything in 2 days instead of 3. I was flying high already, planning how I'd surprise Chloe by picking her up a day early. I didn't call ahead. I wanted it to be a surprise. The Uber dropped me off at the Fletchers' house at 2 in the afternoon. The driveway was empty, which seemed odd, but I figured they were all inside having lunch or maybe taking naps. I used the spare key Margaret had given me and stepped into the foyer, calling out cheerfully, "Surprise, I'm back early." Silence. Then I heard it. A tiny broken sound coming from somewhere deeper in the house. Crying. I followed the sound through the living room past the kitchen and found her in the back hallway near the mudroom. Chloe was on her hands and knees scrubbing the tile floor with a rag that was way too big for her small hands. Her face was streaked with tears and dirt, her hair falling in her eyes. She was wearing the same clothes from 2 days ago now, stained and wrinkled. The floor around her was covered in muddy footprints that looked like they came from adult boots. Lots of them, like a whole group of people had tracked mud through the house. Chloe, she looked up at me, and the relief that flooded her face nearly brought me to my knees. She dropped the rag and launched herself into my arms, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Mama, you came back. You came back early. Of course I came back, baby. I promised you 3 days. Where is everyone? Through her tears, she managed to choke out the story that would haunt me forever. They went to the zoo, the new exhibit with the baby elephants. Emma really wanted to see them. Why aren't you with them? Chloe's sobbing intensified. I spilled soup at lunch. On the floor. Grandma said I was too clumsy to go somewhere special. Said I needed to learn to clean up my own messes before I could have treats like real family members get. Real family members. My vision went red. I held Chloe tighter, trying to keep my voice calm, even though every cell in my body was screaming. Baby accidents happen. You're 8 years old. 8-year-olds spill things. Grandma said Emma never makes messes like that. Said Emma knows how to behave in public, and I don't. She made me stay here to think about my actions. I looked around the hallway. This wasn't a quick cleanup job. Chloe had been scrubbing for hours. Her little hands were red and raw from the rough rag. How long have you been cleaning since they left? After lunch. I think maybe 3 hours. I wanted it to be perfect when they got back so Grandma wouldn't be mad anymore. 3 hours. My 8-year-old daughter had been alone in this house for 3 hours scrubbing floors as punishment for being a child. Chloe, where did you eat breakfast and dinner last night? She wiped her nose on her sleeve. In the kitchen, at the little table by the window. Emma got to eat at the big table with Grandma and Grandpa. The kids' table. They'd made her eat at the kids' table while Emma dined with the adults. What did you have for meals? Cereal and sandwiches. Emma got pancakes and bacon for breakfast. And last night they ordered pizza. But Grandma said I should have a sandwich instead because I needed to learn to appreciate simple things. They'd ordered pizza for Emma and Harold and Margaret. Made my daughter eat a sandwich alone at a separate table. I was taking pictures with my phone before I even realized what I was doing. The muddy floor, the oversized cleaning rag, Chloe's red hands, her stained clothes. Evidence of emotional abuse disguised as discipline. Then I started a video. Chloe, can you tell me again what happened at lunch today? She looked confused, but repeated the story. How she'd accidentally bumped the soup bowl with her elbow. How Margaret had sighed dramatically and said she was disappointed but not surprised. How Jessica had agreed that maybe Chloe wasn't ready for family outings yet. And where is Emma now? At the zoo with Grandma and Grandpa. They left right after lunch. Emma was so excited about the baby elephants. I stopped recording. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Chloe, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Nothing. Do you understand me? She nodded, but I could see she didn't believe it. In her mind, she was the problem. She was the one who didn't belong. We're going home now. Right now. But what about my suitcase? I'll get it later. Right now, I just want to get you out of here. As I gathered her things, I found more evidence of the weekend from hell. Chloe's toothbrush was in the guest bathroom, while Emma's was in the master bathroom with Harold and Margaret's. Chloe's clothes were hung up in the coat closet, while Emma's were neatly arranged in the guest bedroom. They'd literally relegated my daughter to closet space. I was loading Chloe into my car when my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Having such a great time at the zoo, Emma feeding the giraffes. So glad we could give the girls this special day together. I screenshot that text too, because apparently Jessica thought leaving one 8-year-old home alone as punishment while taking the other to the zoo constituted a special day together. As we drove home, Chloe fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from crying and scrubbing floors for hours. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror at her puffy eyes and the tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. I'd failed her. I'd handed her over to people who saw her as less than. and I'd flown across the country to take pictures while my daughter learned that her worth was conditional. Never again. Whatever it took, whatever bridges I had to burn, this would never happen again. When we got home, I did two things. First, I ran Chloe a bubble bath and held her while she cried out 2 days worth of pain and confusion. Then, I called Mark in Seattle. We need to talk. Now. About your parents. About what they did to our daughter. Olivia, what's wrong? You sound... They left her alone, Mark, while they took Emma to the zoo, made her scrub floors for hours as punishment for spilling soup. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Mark spoke and his voice was deadly quiet. I'm getting on the next flight home. That night was the longest of my life. After Chloe's bath, I tucked her into our bed instead of her own room. She curled up against me like she used to when she was smaller, when nightmares would wake her up and only Mama could chase them away. Except this nightmare was real, and I couldn't chase it away with a glass of water and a bedtime story. Mama, her voice was so small in the darkness. Yes, baby, am I broken? The question hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean? Grandma Margaret said Emma never makes messes like I do. That Emma knows how to behave and I don't. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I turned on the bedside lamp and looked into those green eyes that had seen too much in her 8 years. First losing her parents, now this. Chloe Elizabeth, look at me. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Nothing. You are smart and kind and funny and creative. You are perfect exactly as you are. Then why don't they like me? It was the question I'd been dreading. How do you explain adult cruelty to a child? How do you tell an 8-year-old that some people's hearts are too small to love beyond their own blood? Sometimes grown-ups make terrible mistakes, baby. Sometimes they forget that love isn't about where you come from, it's about who you choose to be. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, do you think they'll ever love me like they love Emma? I had to bite my lip to keep from crying. I don't know, sweetheart, but I know this. Their inability to see how amazing you are says everything about them, and nothing about you. She fell asleep holding my hand, but I stayed awake all night watching her breathe, documenting every detail of what had happened. I wrote down everything she'd told me, took more photos of her raw hands, saved all the texts and evidence. Because I knew this wasn't over. Harold and Margaret would have explanations. Jessica would have excuses. There would be gaslighting and manipulation and attempts to make me seem like the unreasonable one. I needed proof that this wasn't about discipline or tough love. This was about a family that had decided my daughter wasn't worth their full affection. Mark's flight landed at 6 a.m. I'd never seen him so angry. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Show me everything. I walked him through the photos, the videos, Chloe's account of the weekend. With each piece of evidence, Mark's expression grew darker. They made her eat alone while they ordered pizza for Emma. Every meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, always at the kids' table while Emma got to sit with the adults. And they left her alone for 3 hours. To scrub floors, Mark, with a rag bigger than her hands, trying to clean up muddy footprints from adult boots. Mark was pacing now, running his hands through his hair, the way he did when he was trying to debug impossible code. I can't believe this. I mean, I can believe it, but I can't believe they thought this was acceptable. There's more. I showed him the closet where they'd hung Chloe's clothes, the guest bathroom where they'd put her toothbrush while Emma got to use the master bathroom. They literally treated her like a second-class citizen in their own home. Mark sat down heavily on our couch. My parents did this. My parents. The question is, what do we do now? Before Mark could answer, my phone rang. Margaret. I put it on speaker. Olivia, dear, we just got back from the zoo and found Chloe's things missing. Jessica said you picked her up early. Her tone was light conversational, like nothing had happened. Yes, Margaret. I came home early from my shoot. Oh, how wonderful. I hope it went well. We had such a lovely time with the girls. Emma absolutely loved the baby elephants. Girls. Plural. Like Chloe had been there too. Mark grabbed the phone. Mom, we need to talk about how you treated Chloe this weekend. A pause. Then Margaret's voice suddenly cooler. I'm not sure what you mean, dear. You left her alone for 3 hours while you took Emma to the zoo. She needed to learn responsibility. She made quite a mess at lunch and needed to clean it up properly. She's 8 years old, Mom. 8. You don't leave 8-year-olds alone as punishment. We weren't gone that long, and she needed to learn that actions have consequences. Mark looked at me, and I could see him realizing what I already knew. There would be no accountability, no apology, just justifications and deflection. Mom, you made her eat every meal alone while Emma ate with you. She seemed to prefer the quiet table. Some children are more comfortable eating separately. Lies, smooth practiced lies that painted their cruelty as consideration for Chloe's preferences. And you put her clothes in the closet while Emma got the guest room. There wasn't enough space in the guest room for both girls' things. We made the best arrangements we could. I couldn't listen anymore. I took the phone back. Margaret, I have photos, videos, documentation of everything that happened this weekend. Silence. I have Chloe on video explaining how she ate alone at every meal. How you called her too clumsy for family outings. How you told her Emma never makes messes like she does. More silence. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to my daughter. A real apology, not an excuse. And you're never going to be alone with her again. Margaret's voice turned icy. I think you're being quite dramatic, Olivia. We were simply trying to teach her proper behavior by emotionally abusing her. That's a very serious accusation. Yes, it is, and I have very serious evidence to back it up. The line went quiet for so long, I thought she'd hung up. Finally, Margaret spoke again. I think everyone needs to calm down and think about what's best for the family. I am thinking about what's best for my family. My daughter, who will never be subjected to your version of grandparenting again. I hung up before she could respond. Mark stared at me, then slowly smiled. It was the first smile I'd seen from him since I'd called him in Seattle. That was amazing. That was just the beginning. They showed up at our house 2 hours later. All of them. Harold, Margaret, Jessica, and Emma. No phone call, no warning. Just the doorbell ringing like this was some casual family visit. I watched them through the front window, gathering their courage in our driveway. Margaret was smoothing her hair, Harold was adjusting his tie, and Jessica was giving Emma some kind of pep talk. They thought they could overwhelm us with numbers, present a united front, and make us back down. They were wrong. Mark opened the door before they could ring the bell again. I stood behind him, arms crossed, while Chloe peeked around the corner from the living room. Mom? Dad? Jessica? Mark's voice was flat, emotionless. This is unexpected. Margaret pushed forward with her practiced smile. We thought it would be better to clear the air in person. There seems to be some misunderstanding about the weekend. No misunderstanding, I said, stepping up beside Mark. Just documentation. Harold cleared his throat. Perhaps we could come in. Discuss this like civilized adults. Mark hesitated, then stepped aside. Fine, but this conversation happens without the kids present. Emma immediately ran toward the living room calling for Chloe, but I intercepted her. Girls, why don't you go play in Chloe's room? We need to have a grown-up talk. I watched Chloe's face as she looked at her grandparents. There was no excitement, no joy at seeing them. Just wariness, and something that looked like fear. That broke my heart all over again. Once the girls were upstairs, we gathered in the living room. Harold and Margaret took the couch like they were holding court. Jessica perched on the edge of the armchair, ready to play mediator. I remained standing. So did Mark. All right, Margaret began. I think we need to address these dramatic accusations that were made over the phone. Dramatic? My voice stayed level, but I could feel the fire building. You think documenting child abuse is dramatic? Child abuse. Harold's eyebrows shot up. That's completely absurd. We provided discipline and structure. You isolated an 8-year-old child and made her scrub floors for 3 hours while you took her cousin to the zoo. Jessica jumped in. Mom told me what happened. Chloe made a big mess and needed to learn responsibility. That's not abuse, that's parenting. Parenting. Mark's voice was dangerously quiet. Were you there when it happened, Jessica? Well, no, but Mom explained. So you're defending something you didn't even witness. Margaret folded her hands in her lap, the picture of calm authority. I've raised 4 children successfully. I think I know the difference between discipline and abuse. I pulled out my phone. Let me show you the difference. I played the video of Chloe explaining what happened. Her small voice filled the room, describing the separate meals, the hours of cleaning, the cruel words about not being real family. The silence that followed was deafening. Harold was the first to speak. Well, she certainly has quite an imagination. My blood turned to ice. You're calling my daughter a liar. I'm saying children often exaggerate when they're seeking attention. That's when Mark exploded. Attention. She was seeking attention by scrubbing floors alone for 3 hours. That's your explanation. Margaret's mask finally slipped. Mark, honey, you need to understand. Chloe isn't like Emma. She requires more firm guidance. What does that mean exactly? Emma was raised from birth with proper structure. Chloe has been through trauma. Sometimes traumatized children need stronger boundaries. I could barely breathe. They were using my daughter's tragedy, losing her parents, as justification for treating her like a second-class citizen. So, because her parents died, she deserves less love? That's not what I said. That's exactly what you said. Mark's voice was shaking with rage. You're saying that because she's adopted, because she's been through loss, she doesn't deserve the same treatment as Emma. Jessica tried to interject. You're twisting their words. I pulled up the photos on my phone. Then explain this. I showed them the picture of Chloe's raw hands from scrubbing, the image of her toothbrush relegated to the guest bathroom while Emma's sat with the adults. The closet where her clothes hung while Emma's were carefully arranged in the bedroom. Explain why you made her eat every meal alone while Emma dined with you. Margaret's composure cracked completely. We were trying to give Emma some special grandmother time. She doesn't get to see us as often since we live so far away. And Chloe, what was she supposed to get? She was getting a lesson in humility and respect. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Everyone stared at Margaret, who had just revealed exactly what she thought of my daughter. Harold tried to backtrack. What Margaret means is no. Mark cut him off. I know exactly what she means. She means that Chloe isn't worthy of grandmother time, that she needs to earn love through submission while Emma gets it unconditionally. Margaret's face flushed red. How dare you put words in my mouth? Then tell me what you really think of Chloe. The question hung there, demanding an honest answer. Margaret opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. She's a lovely child, but she's not our blood, Mark. She's not our granddaughter the way Emma is. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but it's the truth. The room went dead silent. Jessica looked horrified. Harold was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Mark's voice was barely a whisper. She's been my daughter for 3 years, Mom. Legally, emotionally, completely my daughter. But she's not mine, Margaret said, and there it was. The ugly truth finally exposed. I felt something shift inside me, a kind of cold clarity that comes when all pretense is stripped away. Thank you, I said. Everyone looked at me in confusion. Thank you for finally being honest, for saying what we all knew you felt but were too cowardly to admit. Margaret opened her mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. Here's what's going to happen now. You're going to leave my house. You're going to stay away from my daughter. And if I ever hear that you've said one word against her to anyone in this family, I will make sure every person you know sees the videos and photos of what you did to an 8-year-old child. You can't keep us away from Mark. I'm not keeping you away from Mark. I'm keeping you away from the child. You just admitted you don't consider your granddaughter. Harold stood up slowly. I think everyone needs to calm down. No, Dad, Mark interrupted. I think it's time you left. As they filed toward the door, Jessica turned back one last time. You're going to regret this, Olivia. Family is family. I looked her dead in the eye. You're absolutely right. Family is family, and we just found out who our real family is. The door closed behind them with a quiet click that sounded like the end of an era. From upstairs, I could hear Chloe and Emma playing their laughter drifting down like music. At least one relationship might survive this mess. But the adults. We were done pretending that blood was thicker than decency. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within 24 hours, Jessica had called every member of Mark's extended family with her version of events. According to Jessica's narrative, I was an unstable woman who'd manipulated Mark into cutting off his loving parents over normal grandparent discipline. Chloe was a troubled child who'd lied about the weekend to get attention, and Mark was a weak husband who'd chosen his wife over his family. The first call came from Mark's uncle Robert at 7 in the morning. Mark's son, I heard about the situation with your parents. Jessica's pretty upset. Says Olivia won't let them see their granddaughter anymore. Mark put the phone on speaker so I could hear. Uncle Rob, that's not what happened. Look, I know Margaret can be a little old-fashioned in her discipline methods, but she raised 4 good kids. Maybe you should reconsider. They left Chloe alone for 3 hours while they took Emma to the zoo. Silence. Then, well, sometimes kids need to learn consequences. She's 8, Uncle Rob. They made her scrub floors with her bare hands because she accidentally spilled soup. Jessica said she made quite a mess. Mark hung up. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, realizing this was just the beginning. By noon, Mark's phone had 17 missed calls. His cousin Amy, his brother Tom, his sister-in-law Rachel, all of them had gotten Jessica's version. All of them were concerned about our overreaction. The text messages were worse. From cousin Amy, family therapy might help you work through whatever issues you're having with mom and dad. Cutting them off seems extreme. From brother Tom, I don't know what's going on, but Jessica says you've banned mom and dad from seeing Chloe. That seems harsh for a discipline issue. From Mark's college friend who'd somehow gotten dragged into this, hey man, heard about the family drama. Sometimes stepkids need firmer boundaries. Maybe give your parents some grace. Stepkids. That one hit like a physical blow. But the cruelest cut came from Jessica herself in a group text to the entire family that somehow Mark got included on. I'm really worried about Chloe. She's been through so much trauma, and now Olivia is using her to drive a wedge between Mark and his parents. The poor child is clearly confused and acting out for attention. We need to pray that Mark finds the strength to do what's right for his real family. Real family, there it was again. I found Mark in our bedroom that evening, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. I can't believe this, he said. 20 years of family gatherings, holidays, celebrations, and they're all choosing to believe that we're the problem. Not all of them, I said, sitting beside him. Your brother Danny called. Remember, he said he believes us. Danny had been the only one to ask for our side of the story. When Mark told him everything, including showing him the videos, Danny's response had been immediate. Jesus, Mark, that's not discipline, that's emotional abuse. I'm so sorry. One person, Liv, out of my entire extended family, one person bothered to ask what actually happened. The hardest part was watching how it affected Chloe. She didn't understand why Emma couldn't come over anymore, why there were no more Sunday dinners with Grandma and Grandpa, why everything had suddenly changed. Did I do something wrong, Mama? She asked me one night during our bedtime routine. No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Then why is everyone mad? How do you explain to an 8-year-old that some adults choose loyalty over truth? That family can be both the people who love you most and the people who hurt you deepest. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about what's right and what's wrong, I said carefully. And sometimes that means families have to spend time apart until they can figure things out. The lies Jessica spread got more elaborate with each telling. By the end of the week, the story had morphed into me being a manipulative woman who'd isolated Mark from his family, coached Chloe to lie about abuse, and threatened to divorce him if he didn't cut off his parents. None of it was true. All of it was believed. Mark's cousin Sarah, who'd always been close to him, called with the most painful conversation yet. "Mark, I love you, but I think you need to consider the possibility that Olivia is, well, that she's not being entirely honest about what happened." "Sarah, I have video evidence. Videos can be edited. Kids can be coached. I'm just saying it's convenient that this all happened when you weren't there to witness it." Mark's voice was hollow when he responded. "You think my wife coached my daughter to lie about being emotionally abused? I think people sometimes see what they want to see when relationships are already strained." After he hung up, Mark was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that broke my heart. "What if they're right? What if I'm choosing you over my family?" I turned to face him fully. "Mark, look at me. Do you believe Jessica's version? Or do you believe the evidence? Do you believe the videos of your daughter explaining what happened? Or do you believe the people who weren't there?" He was quiet for another moment. Then, "I believe Chloe. I believe the photos. I believe what I saw with my own eyes when I got home." "Then you're not choosing me over your family. You're choosing your daughter over people who hurt her." The final straw came when Jessica posted on Facebook. A long emotional post about the pain of being cut off from a beloved nephew, about praying for families, torn apart by misunderstandings, about hoping that someday the truth would come to light. She didn't mention names, but everyone knew. The comments were full of support for her prayers for her family, and thinly veiled criticisms of unnamed family members who were letting pride destroy relationships. Mark deleted his Facebook account that night. "I can't watch them rewrite history in real time," he said. "I can't watch them turn my daughter into the villain of their story." But there was one bright spot in all the darkness. Emma. 3 days after the confrontation, Emma called Chloe. Jessica had apparently gone to the grocery store, leaving Emma with her father, and Emma had snuck the phone call. I answered Chloe's cell phone and heard Emma's small voice. "Is Chloe there? I miss her." When I handed the phone to Chloe, she lit up for the first time all week. "Emma, I miss you too." They talked for 20 minutes about school, about books, about everything except the family drama swirling around them. When they hung up, Chloe looked at me with hope in her eyes. "Emma doesn't think I'm bad, Mama." "No, baby. Emma loves you. Nothing can change that." It was a small victory in a war we never wanted to fight, but it reminded me why we were fighting it. Not for the adults who'd chosen sides without seeking truth. Not for the extended family who'd accepted lies rather than face uncomfortable realities. We were fighting for Chloe, for her right to be loved unconditionally, for her right to be treated as an equal member of this family. And we were fighting for Emma too, because someday Emma would be old enough to understand what really happened. And when that day came, she'd know that her uncle and aunt had fought to protect both of their daughters, even when it cost them everything else. Some battles are worth losing everything for. This was one of them. The reckoning came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Mark's brother Danny called with news that would change everything. "Mark, you need to know what happened at Mom and Dad's yesterday." I could hear the exhaustion in Danny's voice through the speaker. He'd been caught in the middle of this family war, trying to stay neutral while watching his relatives tear each other apart. Emma asked Mom point blank why Chloe couldn't come to her birthday party next month. Mark and I exchanged glances. Emma's 9th birthday was always a huge family affair at Harold and Margaret's house. Chloe had been looking forward to it for months before everything happened. "What did Mom say?" "That's just it. She tried to give Emma some runaround about Chloe being busy, but Emma wasn't buying it. She started crying and said she knew it was because of what happened when Chloe stayed over. My heart clenched. Emma had been there. She'd seen everything. Then Emma said something that knocked Mom completely off balance. She said, "Grandma, I know you made Chloe eat alone. I know you left her home when we went to the zoo. I know you were mean to her." Danny's voice cracked slightly. Mom tried to explain that it was discipline, that Chloe needed to learn responsibility. And Emma, this 9-year-old kid, looked her straight in the eye and said, "That's not what you do to family, Grandma. That's what bullies do." I felt tears starting to form. Emma had seen the truth all along. Jessica tried to step in and explain that sometimes adults have to make hard decisions. But Emma wasn't having it. She said, "Chloe is my cousin. She's supposed to get the same things I get. That's what fair means." Mark was gripping my hand so tightly it almost hurt. Then Emma did something that floored everyone. She said she didn't want a birthday party if Chloe couldn't come. Said it wouldn't be fun without her best cousin. The silence on our end stretched long enough that Danny asked if we were still there. "We're here," Mark managed. "What happened next?" That's when Dad finally spoke up. He'd been sitting there listening to his granddaughter explain basic human decency to his wife, and I think it broke something open in him. He told Mom they needed to talk privately. Danny paused, and I could hear him taking a deep breath. I don't know exactly what was said behind closed doors, but when they came out, Mom looked like she'd been crying. Dad looked older somehow, defeated. And Dad said they owed you all an apology, a real one. He said what they did to Chloe was wrong and they needed to make it right. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a crack in the wall of anger I'd built around my heart. Jessica tried to argue that they were just being grandparents setting boundaries. But Dad shut her down. Said there was a difference between discipline and cruelty, and they'd crossed that line. The conversation that followed was one of the hardest of our marriage. Mark wanted to drive over immediately to seize this opportunity for reconciliation. I wasn't ready. "What if this is just damage control?" I asked. "What if they're only apologizing because Emma called them out? Does it matter why they're apologizing if they mean it? How do we know they mean it?" Mark was quiet for a long moment. "I guess we don't. But maybe that's what forgiveness is, taking the risk that people can change." It took 2 more days of discussion, and ultimately it was Chloe who made the decision for us. "I miss Grandma and Grandpa," she said during dinner. "Even though they were mean to me, I still miss them. Children have a capacity for forgiveness that humbles me. Where I saw betrayal and cruelty, Chloe saw hurt people who needed chances to do better. We agreed to meet at a neutral location. Not their house, not ours. A quiet restaurant where we could talk without the weight of territory and ownership clouding things. Harold and Margaret looked older when they walked in. Margaret's usual perfect composure was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine shame. Harold's shoulders were slumped in a way I'd never seen before. They sat across from us, and for a moment nobody spoke. Finally, Margaret broke the silence. "Chloe, I owe you an apology." Her voice was shaky, uncertain. This wasn't the confident woman who'd dismissed our concerns on the phone. "I was wrong, very wrong. The way I treated you that weekend was not okay. You didn't deserve to be left alone or made to clean floors or excluded from family activities." Chloe, who'd been nervous about this meeting, looked directly at Margaret. "Why did you do it?" The question was simple, innocent, devastating. Margaret's composure cracked completely. "Because I was scared," she whispered. "Scared that loving you the way I love Emma would somehow take away from the love I have for her. Scared that admitting you're my granddaughter means admitting that families aren't just about blood." Harold reached over and took his wife's hand. "We were stuck in old thinking, sweetheart. Thinking that love is a limited resource, that there's only so much to go around. But Emma taught us something important," Margaret continued, tears flowing freely now. "She taught us that love multiplies when you share it, that being fair doesn't mean everyone gets exactly the same thing. It means everyone gets what they need to feel valued. Chloe considered this with the seriousness only children can bring to complex emotional concepts. So you won't be mean to me anymore. Never again, Harold said firmly. We want to earn back your trust. We want to be the grandparents you deserve. It wasn't a magic moment where everything was instantly healed. Trust once broken takes time to rebuild. But it was a beginning. Emma, who'd been the catalyst for this reckoning, hugged Chloe fiercely when we picked her up after lunch. I told them they were being mean, she whispered to Chloe. I told them you're my best cousin and they had to be nice to you. Watching them together, I realized something profound. The next generation was already better than ours. Emma had seen injustice and called it out. She'd refused to accept preferential treatment at her cousin's expense. Maybe that's how families really heal. Not through the adults swallowing their pride and admitting their mistakes, though that's important too. Maybe families heal when children refuse to accept the prejudices and limitations of their elders. When they insist on a better way forward. Emma and Chloe were already building that better way, one hug at a time. 6 months later, I stood in Harold and Margaret's kitchen, watching something I never thought I'd see again. Chloe and Emma were making cookies together, flour in their hair, chocolate chips scattered across the counter. Margaret was guiding them through the recipe, her voice patient and warm as she showed Chloe how to fold in the ingredients without overmixing. Good job, sweetheart, Margaret said, as Chloe successfully shaped a cookie. You're a natural baker. The word sweetheart hit me like a revelation. When was the last time I'd heard Margaret use a term of endearment with Chloe? Maybe never. The healing hadn't happened overnight. It took months of supervised visits, family therapy sessions, and countless conversations about boundaries and expectations. Dr. Martinez, our family therapist, had made it clear that rebuilding trust would require consistent action, not just words. Margaret and Harold had to prove their change through behavior week after week, month after month, and slowly, painfully, beautifully, they did. The first breakthrough came when Margaret called to invite Chloe to a pottery class. Not Chloe and Emma, just Chloe. One-on-one, grandmother-granddaughter time. I want to learn about what you enjoy, Margaret had said on the phone. Emma told me you love art, and I realized I've never asked you about your favorite artists or what kind of art makes you happy. That pottery class turned into weekly art dates. Margaret discovered that Chloe had an incredible eye for color and design. She started bringing Chloe to museums, letting her choose which exhibits to explore. Harold's transformation was quieter, but just as profound. He began asking Chloe about her school projects, really listening to her answers, remembering details from previous conversations. When Chloe mentioned wanting to learn chess, Harold spent 2 weeks researching beginner strategies so he could teach her properly. The real test came at Emma's birthday party, the one Chloe had originally been excluded from. Margaret had planned it carefully, making sure both girls were equally involved in every aspect. They each got to choose a theme, each got to invite the same number of friends, each got to help plan the menu. When it came time for presents, Margaret had clearly put thought into gifts that reflected each girl's individual interests. Emma got a professional quality keyboard for her music. Chloe got a complete art studio setup with easels, paints, and canvases. But the moment that told me everything had truly changed came when Margaret was taking pictures. In previous family gatherings, Emma had always been the focus of photo sessions, while Chloe was an afterthought. This time, Margaret spent just as much time photographing Chloe, capturing her genuine smile as she painted a picture for Emma. Later, I found Margaret creating identical photo albums for both girls, making sure they each had the same number of individual shots. The most powerful change happened during our family therapy sessions. Dr. Martinez had pushed Harold and Margaret to examine their unconscious biases, to understand how their actions had communicated that love was conditional on biology. In one particularly difficult session, Margaret broke down completely. I think I was afraid, she admitted through tears. Afraid that if I loved Chloe the same way I loved Emma, people would think I was weak, that I was giving in to political correctness, instead of following natural instincts. Dr. Martinez asked her to explore that fear. I was raised to believe that blood family comes first, that adoptive relationships are nice, but they're not the same as real relationships. I know that's wrong now, but unlearning 50 years of thinking, it's harder than I expected. Harold nodded slowly. We hurt a child because we were too proud to admit our thinking was outdated. That's something we'll have to live with. The conversation that followed was one of the most honest our family had ever had. We talked about unconscious bias, about how love multiplies rather than divides, about the difference between preference and prejudice. Chloe, who had been remarkably patient through all of this, finally spoke up. I just want to know that if something happens to Mama and Daddy, you'd take care of me the same way you'd take care of Emma. The question hung in the air like a challenge. It was the ultimate test of whether Harold and Margaret truly saw her as family. Margaret answered without hesitation. Of course we would, sweetheart. You're our granddaughter. That's not negotiable anymore. Harold added, We'd fight for you just as hard as we'd fight for Emma, because that's what grandparents do. Watching Chloe's face light up at those words, I realized we'd achieved something more valuable than an apology. We'd created actual change. Today, as I watched the girls giggle over their cookie decorating, I thought about how far we'd all come. Emma had learned to stand up for justice, even when it was uncomfortable. Harold and Margaret had learned that love isn't diminished by expansion. Mark had learned that protecting his daughter was worth risking family relationships, and Chloe had learned that she was worth fighting for, that her place in this family wasn't conditional or temporary, that she belonged here completely and permanently. The cookies came out of the oven golden brown and slightly lopsided. Perfect imperfection, just like our family. Margaret carefully transferred them to a cooling rack, while the girls bounced around excitedly, planning which ones they'd eat first and which ones they'd save for the adults. Mama, look, Chloe called out, holding up a star-shaped cookie decorated with purple icing. Grandma Margaret showed me how to make the edges smooth. Grandma Margaret, not just Margaret, not Mark's mom, Grandma. As we gathered around the kitchen table to sample the cookies, I watched Harold ruffle Chloe's hair the same way he ruffled Emma's. I watched Margaret automatically cut Chloe's cookie into smaller pieces without being asked the way she always did for Emma. Small gestures. Unconscious actions. The kind of behavior that only comes from genuine love, not performed affection. Later that evening, as we drove home, Chloe fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from a full day of baking and playing. Mark reached over and squeezed my hand. You did it, he said quietly. You saved our family. We all did it, I corrected. Even Harold and Margaret. It took courage for them to admit they were wrong and work to change. But mostly, I thought it was Chloe who saved us. Her capacity for forgiveness, her willingness to give second chances, her insistence on being loved for who she was rather than where she came from. Some families are born perfect. Others have to be built brick by brick, mistake by mistake, forgiveness by forgiveness. Ours was definitely the second kind, and I couldn't imagine it any other way. Love, I'd learned, isn't about blood or biology or legal documents. It's about showing up. It's about choosing each other again and again, especially when it's hard. Harold and Margaret had finally learned to show up for Chloe. And Chloe, with the wisdom that only children possess, had shown us all what unconditional love actually looks like. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth fighting for. And in the end, that's what family really means.